Yes. Well, I went to Iran, I guess in 2001,
Yeah.
and I stayed into 2002 for about 3 months. And I really wanted to study cinema there with all the great Ustad Ha, Mr. Kiarostami, Mr. Makhmalbaf, Mr. Panahi. These were films I really loved. They exerted great power over my meaningless young life, and I really wanted to. I always had made films. I wanted to study cinema, and I had this dream that I could go to Iran and
Yeah.
learn Farsi and study there. Um, I was very young, and I was quite naive, and I learned
Yeah.
fairly quickly that this was not going to be possible. But I met a lot of really great people, and I went all over Iran, and so that sort of opened me up to my life having this sort of dialogue with
Yeah.
the Iranian cinema, and so that sort of led me on this path. But this was a film I made with a lot of collaborators and a lot of very close friends of mine, and I really do think of it as an expression of collective joy. We even put at the beginning of the film Benami Dusti,
Yeah.
because that's really how we made it. We made it very much together. It's very true. Yes, I mean, of course, if you go to Yazd or Isfahan or Shiraz, those cities do not look anything like Winnipeg at all. However, I will say that Tehran bears some similarity. Tehran, as you
Yeah.
know, is a lot of those structures were built, within the last 60 years.
Yeah.
And strangely, they kind of bear some similarity to many buildings I grew up with. That was my feeling when I first went to Tehran, was how much it resembled buildings I knew in Winnipeg. And similarly, my collaborators who are from Tehran, that was their encounter when they went to Winnipeg. In the reverse sense, they were shocked by how many of these structures reminded them of Tehran. So it's interesting. I mean, I am, of course, very much in dialogue with Tehran through my friends, and they are in dialogue with Winnipeg through me. And most of them had not visited Winnipeg when we started working on the project, and so this was a discovery for them. But it's these sort of brutalist beige-colored buildings, modern, not greatly adorned, that were built sort of, yes, within the last 60, 50 years. There is a strange kind of echo between the two cities in the architecture. Yeah, well, we wrote it. Really, we talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
I wrote a kind of treatment, I guess. Most of the events in the film are kind of autobiographical in nature.
Yeah.
They come from either my family history or my own lived experience. I also play a version of myself in the film.
Yeah.
But so I wrote this kind of as a treatment, and then my collaborators wrote the dialogue. Mostly, some of the film is in French, and I wrote that dialogue. But the dialogue in Farsi is written mainly by my collaborators. So that was sort of the script.
Yeah.
But of course, the script is something that continues being written over the course of making the film, and it came to pass. There's that we made little discoveries. There were little things that happened, which we decided to put in the script. Things that just sort of randomly occurred that were nice details, or ideas that our collaborators had. The last part of the film, the end of the film, has the character Hafez Kamposar singing sadly,
Yeah.
and this was not in the script. The actor came to the set they were filming, and he proposed to do that. So I had this idea. I was thinking maybe he sings sadly alone by himself, and we really liked that idea. And anyway, so we filmed it, and we just sort of let him do what he wanted to do. And so he sang it, and he told us what was done, and then that was it. And we didn't know how that was going to be in the story. We weren't sure how that scene was going to be in the story. But now that the film is finished, I can't imagine the film without that. And so it's kind of like that. I feel like when you're making a film in a really collaborative way, there's this myth of the demon director who wears a Napoleon hat and issues edicts. And this is not my methodology at all. What I love about filmmaking is collaborating, and what I can do with my collaborators is very different from what I do by myself, and what they do with me is very different from what they would do by themselves. So the idea is to sort of create this open mode of creativity where there's a lot of space for how all of our collaborators feel, how they engage with the material, how they see it, how they think about it, and how they express themselves through it. A lot of filmmaking can sometimes be very just transactional. It's like, here's my idea, and you will do this, and I'll give you this money, or whatever. But we were really interested in a zone where people could express themselves through the film. We wrote most of the characters for people that we knew. Most of the people in the film are our own friends.
میدونی رفقا، اون زیباترین و خوش‌اندام‌ترین بوقلمونی بود که تا به حال من دیدم. باهاش آنلاین آشنا شدم. بعد از چند ماه پیغام پسگام مطمئن شدم که خودشه. تمام دار و ندارم هم دادم که بیارمش تو منظومه خودمون.
استاد بذار برات یه دبل بگیرم حالت خوب شه.
نه فدات شم، من از صبح تا حالا رو شونه‌های تو اشک میریزم. من بعد تو رو مهمون کنم.
ای قربان تو، ما همه دست به دست هم میدیم، پیداش میکنیم.
رویای محصولات بوقلمون خوشمزه و لذیذ با قیمت ارزون برای همه وینیپگی‌ها. من هر شب برای بوقلمونامون آواز و شعر میخونم تا زندگی آروم و پر احساسی داشته باشن.
ما سنگدون داریم.
ما اصاره بوقلمون داریم.
خانم جان چایی از بیرون میاری؟ بریز دور، اینجا تیم اورتونه.
ما میخواهیم به شما
I mean, that might be true. I don't know. There's a few professional actors in the film, but very few. Overwhelmingly, it is non-actors, including myself. And they, but again, the idea, we sort of wrote these characters with certain people in mind. And I mean, as you know in your life, there are people who who are performers, They tell a good story, or they're funny, or they're just they have a atmosphere that follows them, or something. And they might not be actors in life, but they can perform. But we do perform constantly. I'm performing now. So it was kind of like that. So we wrote these characters with certain people in mind. And I would say most of the actors who are in the film are our own friends, who and we knew they could do this or this. But then there were a few people that we had to look for. The children, for example, we didn't know them when we started. So we started. It involved sort of some research, and yes, we met these kids who were very talented. So, yes, the idea that we had for the music was, again, to make it hybrid, Again, the movie is not, it's sort of working through three different cinematic languages, right? There's cinematic language of, we can associate with Kanun, cinematic language of Quebec, which is something quite else, and the cinematic language of Winnipeg, which is something quite else. And the idea is that it's not really about any one of those places, but it's about the confluence of the three. And so we wanted the music to be like that too. It's sort of this confluence. So the idea to take classical Persian modes and mix them with electro ambient and see if we could create new emotions that way. It's like there's great distance between these two, but to bring them into proximity and see what happens. That was sort of the experimental idea behind it. And it began as an experimental collaboration between two musicians who don't know each other at all. One who's a santur master, who has devoted his life to santur playing and classical Persian music, and an electronic musician who has a long history of making music entirely in the Western modes of electro ambient. And I knew both of them personally, and I thought they would be great together, but they didn't know each other. So we started with an experiment where I said, I need music for the scene with a figure skater. There's one scene with a figure skater in the movie, and I wanted music for that. And I thought, let's try it and see what happens. And so I put them together, and they became very good friends immediately. And very excited about this new sound that they had kind of, it really worked. It was an amazing collaboration, interpersonally and artistically. And now they perform together. Like they've sort of, I feel like the sound they've created for the movie is a musical metaphor for the whole film. And anyway, so when they sent to me the first version of their music, I had no notes about it. And my collaborators, we were all like, this is perfect. It's like perfect. So anyway, so they ended up doing the soundtrack for the movie. And it was always that. It was always this sort of overlap, this kind of Venn diagram where these two musical traditions that have some distance between them are brought into proximity to create something new. There's a few things. There's a little moment at the beginning of Negin and Nazgol, where
close up,
yes, where they're driving along, and it's at the beginning, the journalist asks questions of some guy on the street regarding a bunch of turkeys, and I think he says, "What something like this." No. Anyway, they go off. It's just this little moment. Anyway, so that made me think about turkeys a little bit, and then Benjamin Franklin had this idea that he wanted the turkey to be the national bird of the United States. He was against the bald eagle. He said the bald eagle is this very cruel bird that steals from other birds, and it has no sense of solidarity to others. But with the turkey, you get community. There's a fraternity between turkeys. There's brotherly love between turkeys. They move in these little communities, and they're a little bit funny, but they're kind of sweet, and there's community with a turkey, and that really appealed to me. And that is sort of the how do you say that? That is sort of the trajectory of the turkey in the film, who does have his own little plot. The Bouralamour. He arrives in Winnipeg solo, and he encounters Omid and then Nazgol, and then and he's sort of walking around the city alone, much like my character is, where we sort of have this parallel. But then at the end, he's found this little community. There's this community of turkeys. And that is, to me, that's a very happy ending, and that's a lot about what we wanted to do with the movie. It's bringing spaces together that normally have great distance between them, and bringing them into this zone where they're sort of overlapping, and they're becoming part of each other, and creating a new way of looking at the world through community. Yeah, well, that's it. It is intended to be a hybrid space. It isn't about Iran or about Winnipeg or about Montreal. Yeah. It is about the confluence of all three. And the idea is to look at the world in a way we haven't looked at it before. And to try to create something new, a new way of looking. That really is the idea. So that was part of the design all the way through. And you're right, it is warm. It is a space. It's I think of it as a Venn diagram. You know, like you take these three spheres and they overlap, and the sphere at the center is some new color, right? It's like a new color emerges out of this overlap of spheres. And what is that? And I feel like in this film, that space is a very warm one. It's a very loving one. It's one that it's a film that is seeking connection. You know, it's above and beyond the geographies we can identify. It is very much about great solitude and great community, great distance and great proximity, universality and particularism, but all in a seeking of connection. And all of us who made it, we really felt like we were learning how to see watching. It's like we were trying to devise a new way of seeing. And we were learning about how to do that. And so, yes, in the design, you know, sort of taking these disparate elements and putting them into proximity, it's like, it's really beautiful. I mean, this is what we do in our lives. It really is. Often, you know, there's a way of thinking about the world in which we separate and we sort of divide the world into multiple solitudes, and that's a way of thinking about it. But what really interests me as a filmmaker and also just as a person is these more ambiguous interzones where we intersect. You know, like, you know, I'm in dialogue with Iran through my friends. They are in dialogue with Winnipeg through me, and our, you know, our lives become part of each other's story. You know? That's true. You know, we fall in love with people who are not exactly like us, and we can create something new that way. Right? This is how we live. But there's a lot, I feel like, since the, you know, and it's worth stating that we wrote this script and really kind of created the idea of the movie during the pandemic, which was a time of immense solitude. Right? And being spaces of togetherness, I feel, are under a certain amount of strain now. A lot of Berlin walls have shut up. A lot of rigidity between people has really become exacerbated by that period of solitude, and so we were really trying to create this space of
connection.
Exactly.
ببخشید آقا، عبدالرحمن غمگسار اینجا زندگی میکنه؟
استاد غمگسار دلال بوقلمون؟
بله.
اینجا نیست، اما مغازش به اینجا خیلی نزدیکه.
میشه بگین چطوری میتونیم پیداش کنیم؟
شما وارد منطقه قهوه‌ای شدید. باید از بخش بیج برگردید. انبار سردخونه رو که رد کنید، اونجا مغازه‌شون رو میبینید.
ساختمونش بیجه؟
خب معلومه که نه بابا جان. منطقه سفید شیری از انبار سردخونه شروع میشه.
مرسی آقا.
سیگار نداری؟ بچه‌های لوکس نونور معرفتم ندارن. اینم از شانس ماست.
Well, that's exactly right, and I think that, you know, Canada has. I think it's a space that we can define and must be redefined. You know, it's. I think Canada, by the nature of what it is, has the possibility to be free of the old pathologies of the nation state, where it's just these solitudes that live separately. This is my space. It's your space. You know, you know. It can be a center zone where people can know each other and cherish each other and have a few laughs. I think it has that capacity. There are, of course, people who want something very different for it, and you know, that is upsetting and disturbing. But it is a space that has that potential, which and so it can be defined, and I think it's exciting to look at it in new ways. And my own feeling about Canada is that it should be just a safe boring place.
Yeah.
That's how I think of it. It should be a place that is boring and safe. That's how I think. Well, I don't see it as a transfer of between Canadian and Iranian. Exactly, I see it as a transfer of character. It's the two characters switch spaces. What they're doing in their lives, they swap, and it's about it's not something I want to define too much because I'm a big believer that cinema shouldn't always be about answers.
Yeah.
There's this poetic zone that has to be protected, and you have to allow the viewer to have their own relationship. But I will tell you this: that the way we understood that scene when we were shooting it, because of course we did have to talk about it to the crew and sort of think about what it was we were doing. And the way my collaborators always described it is the line from Parajana of The Color of Pomegranates. We were looking for ourselves in each other. Well, yeah, there's a few answers for that. One is, I don't think of myself as a dramatist. I'm not, I don't, I'm not like Asghar Farhadi, Mr. Farhadi, or Hayri. I mean, like I'm not interested in drama per se. Like there's lots of filmmakers are driven by that, and they want to create a simulacrum where you kind of you forget that what you're seeing is not real. But I'm interested in the not real, or the idea that we're in filmmaking, no matter what, even when it's driven by an absolute desire to be as realistic as possible, to give very clear answers about everything, and to make everything as authentic as it could possibly be, incredible on every level, it's still a lie. It's still people playing other people. It's spaces pretending to be other spaces. It is times of day, seasons pretending to be other seasons. Day can play night, right? So it's always a cheat, and I'm interested in, and normally we try to hide the cheat, and so the audience is not aware of it. But I feel like in this movie, it's this space playing this other space, playing this other space, and I feel like the audience is very aware of this. It's like we see the conceit, and I'm interested in that. I'm interested in a cinematic emotion. I'm interested in cinema and cinematic language. That's really what compels me as a filmmaker, and I'm interested in creating meaning through cinema rather than through drama, which I think are distinct from each other. So the way we place the actors, the way we use the camera is part of that ambition to a large degree. But I would also say that a lot of that comes from the way we were inspired by a lot of the films, the Iranian films that this movie is referencing. In the West, there's an obsession with action. Who is the actor?
Yeah.
There's an obsession with the active protagonist. You want the protagonist to act, to take action, because that's what a movie is about. You follow the action. Where is the center? Where is the most dramatic thing happening? And when I'm speaking, the camera's on me. When you speak, the camera turns to you. That's how they film in the West. But in a lot of these films, specifically this group of filmmakers who emerged from Kanun, there's a lot more interest in peripheral space. It's like maybe it's interesting for the camera to look at what's happening next to the action. The person listening is maybe more interesting to look at than the person speaking. So we that became part of how we approached filming people specifically. I mean, to some degree, sometimes that's a little bit true. Like but it, it's a process. Like a lot of these shots in the movie, which are very composed, they emerge to a very large degree out of location scouting. These buildings, they exist. It's not like they're our design necessarily. They exist, so there's a way that they can film. There's an angle that is available, and often that's very limited. So that kind of dictates to some degree how we can film. And then, there are other moments that are necessarily more dynamic. The figure skating scene, for example. The figure skater did her routine, and the camera follows that. That's not something we can map in a very rigorous way. It's you have to, Isabel, the director of photography, was had to be very focused on the dynamism, and often the camera leaves the character and finds its way back, and this kind of thing. So it's a combination of both. We did do drawings which mapped out how we were going to cover the action, but often it happens, that on the day it has to change. But I do think that the process of kind of like mapping it out and thinking very carefully about how we want to film and what the language of the movie is before we arrive on set, that was certainly part of the process, definitely. It's true. The immediate next one is a very different film. It's a documentary. It's an all archival film. It's drawn. It's an experimental documentary, entirely made out of archival video and film. So it's a very different piece, very different language, very different mood. But it will be, there will be some similitude. I think, even between the two first features, I feel like you can trace certain elements of humor.
Stylistically already totally the same.
Right. So there's
very clear the audience behind the camera.
Yeah. So I'll pursue that, but I have many other projects that I want to do. I loved making this film with this group of people. I would love to make more films specifically with the actors in this film. I just think there's some fascinating actors that we worked with, and I'd love to work with them again. I would love to make more films in Farsi. It would be amazing. I've been learning Farsi in slow motion for a long time, but I don't. I still sort of. It will be a lifelong process. I speak, like a child still, but slowly.
اینجا یکی از اولین سازه‌های مسکونی در بخش تاریخی بیج وینیپگه.
آدمای معروفی اینجا زندگی می‌کردن؟
نه.
نازگل بودو بیا.
نگین! چرا داریم میدویم؟
سریل تو یخ پیدا کردن.
آخه اصلا چطوری از تو یخ درش بیاریم؟
Alors on me dit que ta dernière journée ici, c'est ça?
Billet pour Winnipeg, s'il vous plaît.
On va discuter de ta nouvelle vie.
J'aimerais des somnifères, s'il vous plaît.
La vie vaut la peine d'être vécue, monsieur.
Bingo! آفرین! باریکلا!
معلمم کاملا دیوانه است.
بزرگ شدی؟ دوست داری چی کاره بشی؟
دیپلمات.
برو تو کمد وایسا.
برو آروم بیدارش کن. بهش بگین که برگشتیم خونه.
ما عجله داریم. شما نمیتونین کمکمون کنین؟
Winnipeg, étrange destination pour le tourisme.
T'as-tu des chaises?
J'en ai.
T'as-tu des étagères?
J'en ai.
T'as-tu des divans?
J'en ai.
من مسعودم. خیلی خوشبختم.
من به اون آقاها اعتماد ندارم.
بچه ها
باشد تا هر روز زندگی نوروزی پر از شادی و خوشی باشه.
همون جوری که رودخونه حسین و بوین میپیونده به رود قرمز، ما هم همه به هم وصلیم آقا.